Climate campaigners broadcasting a warning siren over the COP site. The agreement they're desperately trying to strengthen here overnight doesn't look enough to keep the world to a 1.5 Celsius warming. Poor nations demand funding for suffering weather events major economies are causing, and there are big problems remaining on overall funding from the rich to the poorer south. And there's other grim news. As it stands, the draft agreement text contains a historic breakthrough. It talks about the need to phase out fossil fuel subsidies. However, the feeling around here today is that might not survive into the final agreement. And why? Because Saudi Arabia and a group of other oil-producing countries want it taken out.
1.5 degrees is still on reach, but in life support.
The UN Secretary General back here in last-ditch mode to get things over the line.
When you are on the verge of the abyss, it's not important to discuss what will be your fourth or fifth step. What's important to discuss is what will be your first step.
Do not let them live before they pay!
Climate campaigners are spelling things out in the conference halls in a way diplomats can't.
The fact is, the U.S. is set to expand production of oil and gas more than any other country in the world right now. And the science is very clear. We have to stop the expansion of oil, gas, and coal, as well as reduce the emissions. So it's not a transition if we continue to grow the problem. And right now, both China and the U.S. are growing the problem.
Overnight, the mood here buoyed by an important sideshow away from the main COP talks. China and the US agreeing to cooperate on cutting emissions. They will tackle methane, a big plus, but nothing concrete on how or when to turn off the coal, oil and gas.
These are the two biggest emitters in the world. Together, not far off half the emissions. They're also two countries which found it, to put it mildly, rather difficult to work with each other. And they've declared that the biggest problem facing us is climate, and they're going to do their best to collaborate on climate. And I think that's an extremely important signal.
So now at the COP they pull out all the stops for the strongest possible agreement from 197 nations. Another draft comes overnight as time runs out. And there are still issues over financing, how we adapt to extreme weather events. The final meeting scheduled for 11 a.m. tomorrow, perhaps.
What do we want? When do we want it? Now!
On the streets of Glasgow this morning, the global protest mantra, keep fossil fuel in the ground. At the COP security gates, different methods, same message. Inside, today the day countries acted on it. BOGA, the Beyond Oil and Gas Alliance, a coalition setting a date to stop all fossil fuel production.
We hope that today will mark the beginning of the end of oil and gas.
Denmark, Costa Rica, France, Sweden, Quebec, Wales, Ireland and Greenland, all full members. California, New Zealand and Portugal, associates, keen to set end dates. And Scotland is in discussions.
We're in active discussions about doing that. There's different categories of membership, so we are going through a process of deciding if we join, which category best suits our circumstances. I think it's highly likely we will join in some capacity.
The UK government has not joined. With the media desperate to report real climate action, this was so popular many couldn't get in. But in truth, this was just another positive sidebar to the main COP agreement talks, which, as expected, are fraught and staring possible failure in the face.
So is there real progress or just more talk? I put that to the UK president of COP, Alok Sharma, at a press conference earlier. Are the activists right to say that a text that doesn't have a commitment to phase out fossil fuels shows that this process is meaningless and is the blah, blah, blah that they had warned about at the beginning?
The draft cover decisions, it does reflect the issue on fossil fuels. Let's wait and see what emerges in terms of the next round of text. You know, I would say that the Committee on Climate Change does recognise the fact that our energy mix will still have some oil and gas in it. But I think it's worth recognising that we are recognised around the world as a leader in terms of clean energy transition.
Well, as Alex mentioned, last night we had that surprise announcement from the US and China that they would work together to tackle climate change. But how significant is their side deal? Cut as negotiators begin to pull all-nighters trying to thrash out the main conference agreement. Over to our climate reporter, Simon Roach. Simon.
Thanks, Chris. Let's first just look at why China and the US are so critical in these conversations. Now, they are by far two of the largest emitters, responsible for 27% and 11% of global greenhouse gas emissions. Of course, that's not per capita emissions, it's not historic, but still hugely significant. Now, this political declaration from the two, it was light on detail, but heavy on sentiment. Probably the most significant was this cautious language indicating, and I quote, that they are looking to increase their emissions cuts, by taking ambitious action during this critical decade. Elsewhere, there have been dates put on the table. So in the declaration, warm words, but no dates which they can be held to account to. And it's for that reason that there's only been a tentative welcome from senior negotiators here, including one of the ministers representing small island nations.
There are positive signs, of course, and we should not discount those positive signs. But at the end of the day, we have to have something tangible in our hands. We have to see the commitments on paper. We have to see the commitments in what they do. And then we'll all agree that, yes, it's real and it's happening.
So let's be clear, a political declaration from US and China is totally separate from the actual negotiated legal text being worked on here in Glasgow. And on that, China may be playing a different game, because today we found out that one of the blocs negotiating on their behalf, the LMDC, they've actually asked to get rid of one of the sections of texts which talks about increased emissions cuts. Now, they say that developing countries should not be held to the same kind of timetables on decarbonisation as their developed partners. Now, if China supports that position, it would seemingly fly in the face of this political declaration. We're not going to know either way until the morning when the next draft text come out.
So what's holding the negotiations up?
Well, as you say, we've heard from insiders that the big talks that are just not moving forward is still on finance. Developing countries just say there simply isn't enough for them to be able to accept steeper emissions cuts. Now, that's exactly where we were at the start of this conference, and seemingly a standoff in cash is exactly where we still are right near the end.